Welcome to Dice and Quills, where the art of storytelling meets the roll of the dice. I am Darren Ruckle, professional game master and TTRPG writer, here to share the craft behind world building, adventure design, and running unforgettable games. Whether you're a fellow creator, an aspiring pro, or a lifelong player, you're in the right place. So sharpen your quills, ready your dice, and let's dive into the worlds we imagine. Today we're unpacking one of the most subtle and essential parts of running a great session. Not just once, but every time, spotlight balance. If you've ever wrapped a session and realized one player did everything while another barely spoke, you've felt it. If you've had a game derailed by one loud personality while quieter players disappeared into the background, you've seen it. And if you've ever wondered how to make sure every player feels like they had a meaningful part in the story, even when time is short or scenes get chaotic, this episode is for you. Because Spotlight isn't about equal airtime, it's about shared impact. And managing it well is one of the core skills that separates good GMs from great ones. We'll talk about what spotlight balance really means, why some players naturally dominate it, and how to support players who struggle to take space. We'll also walk through tactical strategies, how to design for balance, how to adjust in the moment, and how to recover when things tilt too far off center. Let's start at the root of it. What spotlight actually is, and why it matters more than you think. Spotlight is a word we throw around a lot as GMs. Let's make sure everyone gets some spotlight. This scene's a spotlight moment for the rogue. But what does that actually mean? It's not just about speaking time. It's not about action economy or who rolls the most dice. Spotlight is about meaning. It's the moment a player feels like their character matters, that they're driving the scene, that the world is reacting to them, that they're shaping the story instead of just riding along. This might be a huge combat moment. It might be a quiet conversation. It might be a choice, a reveal, a risk, anything that centers the character and lets the table feel that shift. And when spotlight is shared well, the whole group feels energized. Everyone's invested because everyone gets their moment. But when it's imbalanced, you get frustration, disengagement, players checking out, interrupting, overperforming, or worst of all, going quiet because they assume no one will notice. That's the moment you start losing your table, even if the content is good. This is why spotlight balance isn't optional. It's the fuel for long-term trust, because the players aren't just investing in the game, they're investing in you, your ability to see them, to hold space for their choices, and to remind them that their character is part of this world. And that balance, it doesn't happen by accident. Next, we're going to talk about the forces that naturally pull spotlight out of balance, and why most imbalance is structural, not personal. Most spotlight imbalances don't come from bad players. They come from structural friction, the invisible forces built into the table, the system, or the story that make it easier for some players to take space and harder for others. Let's break that down. The first factor is player personality. Some players are loud, charismatic, and comfortable improvising. They'll speak first, make bold choices, and naturally become the focus if no one stops them. Other players are thoughtful, quiet, hesitant, or still learning the group's rhythm. They don't grab the spotlight. They wait for it to be offered. If you design scenes that reward initiative and fast thinking, guess which group thrives? Now add character build. Some characters are optimized to do one thing very well. A damage-dealing rogue in a combat-heavy session is going to dominate the action. A bard in a political one-shot? Spotlight magnet. Meanwhile, the utility druid or the soft-spoken warlock might spend most of the session reacting. And then there's table culture. Some groups naturally support balance. They check in with each other, pass the mic, encourage shy players. Others just talk over whoever's quietest. Neither is inherently malicious, but one creates imbalance without even realizing it. System matters too. Crunch-heavy systems with strict initiative structures and class imbalance can tilt the spotlight simply through mechanics. A system that favors combat will spotlight the striker. a rules-light narrative system might reward the most confident speaker. All of these factors combine, and the result? You start seeing patterns. One player always leads the planning. One character always ends the fights. One player always falls behind or fades out. Spotlight imbalance is rarely about favoritism, it's about inertia. Left unchecked, it snowballs. Next, we'll look at how to spot the imbalance early, and what signs to watch for when the spotlight is starting to tilt too far in one direction. So how do you know when your spotlight is drifting? Most of the time, it doesn't show up as someone complaining. It shows up in patterns. Quiet, consistent ones. If you're paying attention, you'll see it. Start with scene participation. Who speaks first when you present a choice? Who makes decisions on behalf of the group? Who engages with NPCs without prompting? If it's the same one or two players every time, that's a flag. Look at combat rhythm. Who has the most to do on their turn? Who's describing their actions with flair? And who's just saying, I guess I attack? Spotlight in combat isn't just about damage, it's about energy. Watch who brings it. Watch who disappears. Then look at interplayer dynamics. Who gets interrupted the most? Who never interrupts? Who defers? And who insists? These aren't just personality quirks. They're signals about comfort and presence. Another sign? Emotional investment variance. You run a big reveal, a twist, a payoff. Some players react loudly, others stay quiet. Sometimes that's just style. But if it happens consistently, you might have a group where only part of the table is emotionally involved. And finally, off-session communication. Who messages you about their character? Who sends ideas, asks questions, or follows up on plot? If the imbalance carries over between games, you're likely seeing an engagement gap. And that usually correlates to uneven spotlight. You're not looking for perfect symmetry, but you are looking for patterns that say, someone's stuck on the edges. Next, we'll dig into the causes of passive spotlight loss, when players aren't taking space, not because they're being pushed out, but because the structure hasn't invited them in. Not all spotlight imbalance comes from over-dominance. Some of it comes from players who step back, and just never find the moment to step forward again. This is passive spotlight loss, and it's one of the easiest problems to overlook because it doesn't look disruptive. It looks like politeness, quiet, stillness, sometimes even agreement. But what it really is distance. There are a few reasons this happens. First is uncertainty. New players, or players new to your table, often hang back because they don't know the group rhythm yet. They don't want to speak over someone. They're afraid of getting a rule wrong. They're waiting for a signal, and if it never comes, they just keep waiting. Second is role ambiguity. If everyone else at the table has a clear role, the party face, the strategist, the comic relief, and one player doesn't, they start to ask, what am I here for? That question kills initiative. Why step forward if the party already has a leader? Third is tone mismatch. If the campaign is fast-paced, silly, high energy, and the player is trying to play a brooding, introspective loner, they fade out, not because they're not invested, but because the table is playing a different tempo than the one they prepared for. Fourth is character design without hooks. If the character is designed to be quiet, secretive, or resistant to engagement, and the player doesn't have a plan to break that open, they're going to self-isolate. That's not a flaw. That's a structure waiting to be activated. And finally, spotlight trauma. This one's real. Some players have had past experiences, at other tables, at home, in performance spaces, where taking up space got them punished, embarrassed, or ignored. So now they're trained to wait, to defer, to survive the session without leaning in. None of this means the player is disengaged. In fact, many of these players care deeply. They're just not being offered the right invitation. That's the word, invitation. Not command, not pressure. Invitation. Next, we're going to talk about how to offer that invitation, how to gently but intentionally draw quieter players forward without putting them on the spot. So how do you bring a quieter player into the spotlight without making them freeze? The answer is invitation with structure. You're not putting them on stage, you're handing them a door and making sure they know it's safe to walk through. One of the most effective tools is the direct, low-pressure prompt. Not, what do you want to do? But you've seen all of this happen. What's your character thinking right now? That question doesn't require action. It just asks for presence. And once they speak, the momentum builds. Another great move is the preloaded decision. You're the one holding the map. Where do we go? The merchant singles you out. She says she recognizes your face. What do you say? You're giving them context, relevance, and narrative importance in a single line. That's the gateway to investment. Use private encouragement, too. If you notice someone hanging back, drop a message after the session. Hey, love the choices you were making. I'd love to give your character a beat next week. Anything you'd like to explore? You're signaling that their presence matters, and you're creating space in advance so the player doesn't have to fight for it live. You can also design moments for their niche. If the party has a scholar, put an ancient artifact in front of them. If someone built for stealth, add an infiltration scene. If someone's playing the only lawful good character in a morally gray party, make that morality a problem they have to navigate. Let the world bend toward them now and then. And never underestimate the power of social reinforcement. Praise goes a long way. When a quieter player takes a risk, speaks up, leads a scene, shares something vulnerable, notice it. That was a strong moment. I really like that choice. You're showing the table what matters, and the table learns from what you praise. This isn't about spotlight distribution. It's about spotlight access. You're not forcing turns. You're making sure the game keeps offering doors. Next, we'll look at what to do when the opposite problem shows up. When one player is taking up too much space, even if they don't mean to, and how to address it with clarity and care. Sometimes the spotlight imbalance doesn't come from absence. It comes from overpresence. One player dominates the conversation. One character drives every plan. One person reacts first to every beat and leaves little room for anyone else to follow. Here's the hard part. Most of the time, they're not doing it maliciously. They're just excited. They're engaged. They care. But excitement without awareness turns into spotlight gravity. It pulls the story toward one orbit, and everyone else becomes a satellite. So what do? Start by observing the pattern. Are they talking over others? Are they filling every silence? Are they solving every problem first? Do they treat the party like backup dancers in their personal arc? These are all signs that their spotlight is expanding at the cost of others. The first step is in the moment redirect. Let's hear what the wizard thinks. Hold that thought. I want to check in with the rogue before we decide. You're not shutting anyone down. You're reframing the rhythm, giving someone else a turn with structure and intention. Sometimes you need a between-session conversation. Keep it private. Keep it respectful. Hey, I love your energy at the table. I've also noticed we've had some quieter players struggling to get their moments in. I'm going to start spreading the spotlight more intentionally. I just want to give you a heads up. Most players will respond well to this. You're not blaming them. You're naming a dynamic. That conversation can shift the table culture without embarrassment, without confrontation, and without a long speech mid-game. You can also adjust the mechanics of your sessions. Use initiative systems outside of combat. Call for ideas in a round instead of popcorn style. Use turn tokens or visual cues in online play. Add go last options for players who want to react instead of initiate. Structure helps disrupt unintentional dominance. And most importantly, model the behavior you want. Pause between questions. Check in with players who haven't spoken. Reinforce collaborative planning. Let silence breathe instead of rushing to fill it. That pacing shift slows the dominant voices and lifts the quieter ones. Next, we'll talk about how to design your sessions, from plot structure to scene transitions, in ways that naturally create spotlight opportunities for every player, without feeling artificial or forced. Spotlight balance doesn't start at the table. It starts in your prep. The way you structure your session, the kinds of challenges you include, the pace of the plot, the shape of the scenes, all of it determines how easily Spotlight flows. Start with character roles. Look at your party and ask, what kind of scene puts this character in a position to shine? Build moments around that. Give your talker a tense negotiation. Give your tactician a planning sequence. Give your wild card a chaotic situation with no obvious solution. And make sure those moments show up before the final arc. Next, vary your structure. A session with only combat favors the loudest mechanics. A session with only social intrigue rewards the most articulate players. Mix your modes. Shift tones. A good session gives every player a window. It's your job to make sure those windows arrive. Scene framing matters too. If every scene is open-ended, what do you want to do next? The loudest players fill the gap. Instead, try rotating framing. Set the scene, then direct attention. You arrive at the crime scene. Paladin, what's your first instinct? Or, the guards are arguing outside the vault. Bard, you're closest. What do you do? That's not railroading, that's scaffolding. You're passing the narrative thread with care. Also, build in splits. Not every session, not every group, but occasionally split the party on purpose. This creates natural dual spotlight. And when you come back together, everyone's had a beat. You don't need to run 2 long arcs. Even 5-minute side scenes help. Don't forget to embed spotlight in mechanics. Give social characters NPCs to connect with. Let arcane characters notice anomalies. Let physical characters solve movement puzzles or environmental problems. The more variety you bake into the session, the more likely every player gets a moment that feels built for them. And if you're improvising, use the characters' backstories and traits as springboards. If you're stuck for a hook, ask yourself, who haven't I centered lately? And throw the next scene their way. Good prep doesn't guarantee balance, but it makes it easier for balance to emerge. And it saves you from scrambling to course correct mid-session. Next, we'll talk about using session recaps and scene transitions as natural ways to rebalance the spotlight without breaking immersion or slowing the game. Session recaps and transitions are powerful tools for spotlight balance, not just because they move the game forward, but because they give you clean, natural moments to redirect attention. Let's start with recaps. Too often, we treat them like a GM monologue, a quick rundown before we dive in. But if you hand the recap to a player, you create an opportunity. You signal that their perspective matters. You say, tell us what happened from your character's point of view. This doesn't have to rotate perfectly. You don't need to force it. But letting different players own the recap, or even just contribute to it, reminds the table that everyone's experience is part of the story. Now look at transitions. Between scenes is when the spotlight naturally drifts. You've wrapped a moment, the energy shifts, and everyone waits to see what happens next. That's your moment to steer. Instead of narrating the next beat yourself, pass the thread. As the group leaves the alley, we cut to the ranger. What are you watching for? Or, the conversation ends. The tension's still high. Sorcerer, what's going through your mind? You're not just filling silence. You're using the structure of the game to distribute narrative ownership. This works especially well after combat. Instead of diving straight into loot or downtime, ask, how did that fight land for you? Give the quiet player a moment to reflect, to show something small but meaningful. Even just a facial expression, a gesture, a short line. Scene transitions are spotlight neutral zones. They're where no one has the focus yet, which makes them perfect places to reset the balance. Another great use of transitions is to foreshadow. Let a quieter player's action lead into the next beat. As you check the broken door frame, you spot a mark you recognize, one from your past. Now the next scene is theirs by default. You've passed the spotlight forward, not back. It doesn't take much. You're not redistributing whole scenes. You're redirecting attention at key moments, just enough to keep everyone tethered to the story. Next, we'll explore how spotlight balance changes over time, across multiple sessions arcs, and campaigns, and why balance doesn't always mean symmetry in the short term. Spotlight balance isn't static. It shifts over time, across arcs, across moods and character choices. And that's a good thing. What matters isn't that every player gets the same amount of attention in every session. What matters is that, over time, everyone feels like they've had space to grow, to shape, and to matter. This is why short-term imbalance isn't always a problem, as long as you're aware of it and making room for the cycle to continue. Some sessions are built around one character's backstory. Others hinge on one player's decisions. That's fine. In fact, it's often necessary. What you're looking for is the long view. Think in arcs, not sessions. Who had the emotional core of Arc 1? Who made the pivotal choice in Arc 2? Who's still waiting for their story thread to emerge? Long-term spotlight isn't just about screen time. It's about narrative weight. A player might speak less often, but still feel like their choices change things. Another might talk a lot, but still feel like they're spinning their wheels. What you're managing isn't volume, it's meaning. Also remember, players evolve. The quietest player in Session 2 might become the emotional anchor by Session 12. The loudest player might fade back and let others rise. Your job is to support those shifts, to let the spotlight follow growth, not just noise. One way to track this is with notes. After each session, jot down who had the key emotional beat, who drove the conflict, who was quiet. You're not looking to force balance next session, you're just gathering data. Awareness alone makes you more responsive in the moment. Another key piece, communicate. Between arcs, check in. Ask each player what they're enjoying, what they want more of, where they see their character going. These don't need to be formal feedback sessions, just touch points. A few sentences can tell you everything you need to know about whether a player feels seen or sidelined. Spotlight isn't a scorecard, it's a rhythm. You don't need to get it perfect every time, but you do need to listen. Because balance over time is what builds trust, and trust is what keeps a campaign alive. Next, we'll look at how different group sizes affect spotlight, and what specific techniques work best for small tables, large parties, and everything in between. Group size changes everything about how spotlight works. At a small table, say 2 to 3 players, spotlight isn't a challenge of distribution. It's a challenge of intensity. Players are in focus all the time. There's no place to hide. Every choice echoes louder, and pacing is more elastic because you're cycling through turns faster. The risk here isn't imbalance, it's burnout. Players can feel exposed if they're always on. So your job is to give breathing room, build quiet scenes, use NPCs to share emotional weight. Let them observe, not just act, and check in more often, because when half the table has an off night, you feel it immediately. At large tables, 6, 7, even 8 players, spotlight becomes a logistical puzzle. You can't give everyone equal time in every scene. You'll lose pacing, but if someone doesn't get a meaningful beat over multiple sessions, they'll start to drift. The key at large tables is spotlight rotation. Don't build scenes for everyone. Build scenes that focus on 2 or 3 players at a time, and rotate who gets centered across the session. Think of it like a shifting lens. One scene for the tactician and the talker. One for the wild card and the introvert. One for the fighter and the quiet support. You also need structure. Open table conversations with 8 players will always be dominated by the most verbal. So use directed questions. Use initiative outside of combat. Use NPCs who go around the circle. It might feel artificial at first, but it levels the floor. For mid-sized tables, 4 to 5 players, you get the sweet spot. Enough space for everyone to breathe. Enough density for dynamic scenes. Even here, though, you need to track the balance, especially in longer campaigns, where early spotlight can lock into habits. Rotate your attention. Design with all the players in mind. Don't just fall back on the loudest arc. And remember, group size affects pacing too. More players means longer combats, more dialogue, more planning. Build your session length with that in mind. Don't expect a clean 3-act structure with 7 players in 3 hours. Adjust the scope. Next, we'll talk about how to repair spotlight damage, what to do when someone has been sidelined for too long, and how to bring them back into the story without it feeling like a sudden patch job. Sometimes, despite your best efforts, the balance slips. A player gets sidelined, an arc shifts away from them. Maybe they've been quiet for a few sessions. Maybe their character's niche hasn't come up. Maybe they're still engaged, but you can feel the distance growing. This is repairable, but you have to be intentional. Start by acknowledging it. Not in front of the group, not mid-session, but privately. Send a message. Check in. Ask how they're feeling about the game. Let them tell you if they feel left out, or if they're content being quiet for a stretch. Don't assume. Ask. If they are feeling disconnected, don't promise equal time. Promise meaningful time. Offer to build a beat just for them. Ask what they want. A combat moment? A moral dilemma? A piece of backstory rising to the surface? Then give it to them early in the next session. Don't delay. Momentum matters. The moment doesn't have to be big. It just has to be clear. A scene where the NPC turns to them first. A clue only they understand. A choice that only their values can resolve. Spotlight repair is about reattaching them to the story and showing the table that their presence still shapes what happens. Avoid the sudden overcorrection. Don't drop a 5-session solo arc on them out of nowhere. That can feel like charity, or worse, like forced attention. Instead, weave them back into the thread that's already running. Let their re-entry feel seamless. You can also spread spotlight repair through group structure. If the loudest players are also good collaborators, ask them to redirect the mic. Hey, bring the cleric into this plan. I want their voice in this. Sometimes a nudge from a peer is more powerful than one from the GM. And finally, follow up. After the scene lands, after they've stepped back in, check in again. Quiet players won't always tell you when they feel left out, but they will tell you when something worked. And once that spark is back, it's easier to keep it burning. Next, we'll explore how Spotlight interacts with character arcs, and why some of the best Spotlight moments aren't loud at all. They're subtle, internal, and absolutely unforgettable. Spotlight doesn't always look like center stage. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's internal, and sometimes the most powerful Spotlight moments are the ones that unfold in silence. A decision made, a belief tested, a character changing in a way only the player can see. This is where Spotlight and character arcs meet. An arc isn't a series of cutscenes. It's a movement, from one belief to another, one self-image to another, one goal to another. And the GM's job isn't to force those arcs. It's to notice them, to give them space, to build friction that lets that movement happen. Here's what that means in practice. When a player is playing a character with a known flaw, a fear, or a contradiction, create scenes that challenge it, not to punish, to invite change. The selfish rogue meets someone who reminds them of who they used to be. The idealistic paladin sees the cost of their purity. The quiet warlock learns something about their patron that throws everything into question. These aren't main character moments. They're pressure points. You're not delivering a monologue. You're framing a choice. And when the player responds, even if it's just with a sentence or a look, that's spotlight. Some of the most satisfying moments you'll ever run come when the table is silent, because everyone feels what just shifted in one character's soul. That's spotlight. That's storytelling. This is why balance doesn't mean equal turns. It means equal opportunity to be seen. Some players will make their arcs loud and dramatic. Others will let them unfold slowly, in glances and quiet lines. Both are valid. Both deserve space. As a GM, it helps to ask, what's this character struggling with, even if the player hasn't said it out loud? If you can answer that, you can start building situations that feel like personalized invitations, and you can start watching for the moment when the player steps into it. Next, we'll wrap up with a final segment that pulls it all together. how to create a table culture where Spotlight is shared, celebrated, and understood as a core part of what makes a story sing. Let's bring it home. Spotlight isn't a bonus feature of good GMing. It's the engine of player engagement. It's how your players know their characters matter. It's how you build trust, energy, and emotional depth session after session. Balancing Spotlight doesn't mean managing airtime with a stopwatch. It means creating a table culture where presence is intentional, where every player, loud or quiet, new or experienced, feels like there's a space for them to step into, and the story wants them there. Sometimes that's mechanical, prompting quieter players, redirecting the dominant ones, structuring scenes that naturally rotate focus. Sometimes it's narrative, weaving arcs, planting moments, passing the mic not just because it's fair, but because it's better storytelling. But the real key? You model it. You reward it. You name it when it's working. When a player supports someone else's moment, praise that. When a character takes a small but meaningful step in their arc, call it out. When the table gives someone space to breathe, to speak, to shape the scene, thank them. The table learns what matters from what you notice. Spotlight isn't about equality. It's about intentionality. It's about giving each player a reason to stay invested, a place to act from, and a feeling. Not just that they were at the table, but that they were in the story. Next time on Dice and Quills, we'll dive into GM improvisation, how to say yes with confidence, build scenes on the fly, and stay grounded when your players do something completely unexpected, which they always do. If this episode helped you, share it, rate it, or drop me a line. I'd love to hear about the best Spotlight moment you've ever seen, or the time you almost lost a player, and what brought them back in. Until next time, sharpen your quills, ready your dice. And remember, the best stories don't have one lead. They have 5 or 6. And when they all shine in turn, that's when the magic happens.